So it's not about you. It's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax.
Classic BBC there. Classic. Oh yeah. It's not the fact that I bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax. The fact.
You told the Sunday Times in 2021 that's why you bought it.
These people.
Sorry?
BBC. Okay, let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
I wanted a shoot. Okay? That's even worse to the BBC. I wanted a shoot, which comes with the benefit of not having to pay inheritance tax.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the show that sprinkles some hope on your political cornflakes and helps you wash them down with a steaming, hot mug of hugs. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Quiet Riot is very much a challenger brand to some incredibly big political podcasts, and we can't thank you enough for helping us storm the charts once again.
Our ambition is simple: to bring reason, analysis and occasional levity straight to your ears on the things you, rather than the Daily Mail, want covered, guided by one simple principle: that you're as smart as, if not smarter than us.
So pop on an extra layer, turn up the central heating, turn down your stress, and join us to begin another Quiet Riot.
Welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi. As you know, we make all of our content available freely to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. So we have had to be a little inventive on how to show our gratitude to those who are able to make it all happen by bunging us a few quid each month.
So for our Ko-Fi supporters, Naomi, Kenny and I will be hosting an Ask Us Anything video chat online on 9th of December at 6 p.m. Maybe you have a burning desire to know what our favourite midnight snack is, or what we really think of other podcasts, or what our favourite inheritance tax threshold looks like.
Or something altogether different. You really can ask us anything, though we reserve the right not to answer everything. Invites will be sent out shortly to all our supporters, so if you're not already signed up for a monthly donation, head on over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod within the next week.
Now, on this week's show, we're going to be discussing what else? The Great Farming Revolt of 2024, headed up by a man of the land, Jeremy Clarkson. We also have regular features, Troll With It and Grin And Share It for you.
Plus, we're going to be discussing more of the fallout from the US presidential election and Trump's cabinet picks. Joining us today is a guest who couldn't be more expert on all things Washington and Whitehall. It's former UK ambassador to the States, Kim Darroch. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks very much.
Kim, in your downtime, I hear you're partial to a spot of sailing. Where's the next big voyage of discovery calling you to?
Well, normally, or at least in past years, we have chartered a boat and done bits of the Mediterranean. We've done the Ionian, we've done the Croatian coast, and we've done Turkey. But now we've bought a very little boat, honestly, only 28 foot long, which, I mean, you could, if you had a lot of money, transport it off to the Mediterranean for the summer, but we're just sailing it around Cornwall.
Right.
And we've only just got it, and we're still learning all of its quirks. And the big voyage, which we will do, I think, next summer, or maybe at Easter, will be just along the coast as far as Foy or possibly Plymouth, which is rather less than we do when we're on the Med, but it's a small boat.
I am a qualified sailor.
Well, you're Greek.
I just want to put that out there.
You're born qualified.
I'm not born qualified. No. When I'm not going to be qualified still. I will need to retake all the exams. But I was, once upon a time, when I was about 16, I worked for a travel agency, and they did sort of short trips to Delos and back from Mykonos. And they needed a deputy sailor, because you can't sail unless you have the right number of people on board. So I had to take all my exams and learn all the knots and had to read the weather and all of that. So I understand the urge. I really do enjoy it.
In the days when I got my qualification, which is probably the lowest available, with which they will let you charter a boat, we had to do all sorts of things like work out charts and tides and things on pieces of paper. And nowadays you just look on the sat nav and you never think about actually
the app.
Exactly.
And you have to be quite good at maths if you're going to do things like navigating at night by the stars and things. It's really quite
especially when the boat is rocky around and pencils going all over the place. So life is simpler now.
In Texas, Trump and Musk were at the launch of the world's largest rocket this week. It wasn't clear who was basking in whose glory, but if power, money and phallic symbolism are your thing, then the SpaceX rocket test was the only place to be. But how long before the immovable object that is Trump and the unstoppable force that is Musk meet in less friendly terms? There has been significant reporting this week that self-appointed unofficial VP Musk is causing quite a lot of ructions by being set absolutely against Trump's plan to introduce tariffs, perhaps because he understands tariffs. Meanwhile, the genuinely mad proposed appointments have continued. The latest, anti-vaxxer and miracle cure peddler, Dr. Mehmet Oz, for running the Center of Disease Control, Medicare and Medicaid, and Linda McMahon, who used to run, I think she founded actually the World Wrestling Federation. She's now going to be in charge of education.
Incredible.
So, Kim, where to start?
If Trump's first go at president is anything to go by, and you lived and breathed it, we can expect some very high levels of turnover, I imagine. Is that a problem?
First of all, I think this term will be different, and I'll explain why. In his first term, he basically had a group of fringe advisors around him because, remember, there were 17 candidates at the start of the Republican race, and they got all the cream of political advisors and campaign managers, and Trump was left with a few figures that basically no one knew, like Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, and people like that. And so when he won, to his huge surprise, the surprise of everyone in his campaign, I promise you none of them expected to win, he didn't really know who to appoint to the cabinet, and the Republican Party advised him to take on certain people who were basically policy mainstreamers, Republican Party mainstreamers, people like Reince Priebus, who was his first chief of staff, people like Jim Mattis, General Mattis, much decorated general, who became defense secretary, people like Rex Tillerson, who was the first secretary of state. And actually these people and a few others from the mainstream ended up blocking quite a lot of the things Trump was trying to do quickly. I remember a guy called Gary Cohn, a Wall Street man who had been president of Goldman Sachs, was the economic advisor in the White House. And he would say to anyone who listened to him in Washington, even while he was in office, he left after about 18 months, that when crazy ideas came up from some of the real ideologues and Trump supporters in the White House on tariffs and things like that, he'd get tipped off by a friend in the outer office, and he'd go in and he would steal them and bury them in the deepest cupboard in the White House.
Amazing.
I believe him, and I think he tells this story himself nowadays. And, so for about 18 months, 2 years, some of these ideas were delayed and were stopped. But he fired everyone from almost the whole of his starting cabinet and White House staff he fired. And by the time you got to the second half of his first term, he had taken America out of the Paris climate change deal. He had taken America out of the Iran nuclear deal and wrecked it as a result.
Yeah.
He'd imposed steel and aluminium tariffs on basically the rest of the world. And so you got Trump, this second half of his first term, adults gone, bunch of enablers and supporters around him, and he did all this stuff. That's why I think you're seeing such an extraordinary range of cabinet appointments this time round, because he's not going to waste 2 years while people try and block him. He wants a bunch of people who are going to make sure he gets through his agenda as quickly and as directly as possible and delivers it all. So,
well, can I ask you a quick question about that, Kim? Because Are there any moderates left in the GOP? There aren't in the UK in the Conservative Party. They were purged or left of their own volition. You know, all of the great people like Dominic Grieve and Ken Clarke, who we saw, leave the party. So how many of them are left in the GOP? And are these kind of sensationalist appointments who are, possibly pretty underqualified,
to say the least,
being generous to do the role, going to alienate some of those people who are like, hang on, I've been a Republican senator, congressman, senior advisor for a very long time, and you're overlooking me when I probably could do the job. And could that cause problems for him?
The place, Naomi, where the Trump takeover is virtually complete is the House of Representatives, because they have to get re-elected every 2 years, and if you don't have Trump supporting you explicitly, you won't get through the primaries. So House of Representatives is full of 100% Trump supporters. The place that is different is the Senate, where they get 6 years for each term, and there are some very ancient figures there. There's several senators in their 80s who are very independent-minded, and so you will find, I think, some opposition to some of Trump's more extreme ideas from the Senate. And I think there may be some senators, you don't need many of them, you need 3, I think, who will question the nomination of some of these figures, notably the health secretary, Robert Kennedy, the anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist, and Matt Gaetz, who is an extraordinary choice for Attorney General. So you may see some of that. The other place where you find some mainstream Republicans still, and you saw it in the 2020 election when they were insisting that the election results be respected in places like Georgia, is in the states.
Governors.
Some of the governors and some of the people below them, lieutenant governors and election commissioners and so on. So it's not lost, but equally it's not wrong to say that Trump is now more dominant than ever in the Republican Party.
I think that's fair, but I also wonder whether that first crop of people who were of the right of the Republican Party but understood how Washington works, while acting as blockers for the more mad ideas, also acted as interfaces for the things that they did want to happen, because there's still a federal government machinery there.
Now, Trump's biggest domestic achievement, if you call it an achievement, of all, was his tax reductions, which he delivered in 2018, which were the biggest since Reagan in the mid-'80s. And the people who got that through were Paul Ryan, who was the leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, and Gary Cohn, my friend, who was the economic advisor between them. Trump actually, in terms of his personal involvement, did very, very little. But they managed to get it through both houses and onto the statute sheet. I mean, I say achievement because it's completely unfunded. So you can question whether actually, I think anyone likes to pass tax reductions if there is no cuts or expenditure elsewhere. But anyway, so
when you're the reserve currency,
so there,
it's quite
exactly.
forgiving.
So there is you are right that one of the results of having some mainstream experienced Republicans was to get that big piece of legislation through.
Because I'm looking at my favourite appointment of all, Tulsi Gabbard,
yes,
as director of National Intelligence. We had an interview the other week with someone who was speaking to government sources that genuinely are not sure whether she might be a Russian asset.
Well, she has defended the invasion of Ukraine as justifiable, given that Ukraine was a threat to Russia.
So the question is, when she sits down with the head of the FBI and the head of the CIA and the head of Homeland Security, if she tries to impose quite mad stuff on them, those agencies are not without power.
Yeah. The thing about those agencies is they look inwards a lot. They're almost like they're like closed societies. And they have a tremendous within them, people really believe in what they're doing, and they think it is crucial to America's security. So I think you're right. If they get crazy instructions they think are crazy or dangerous or damaging to American security, they will resist.
Yeah.
They will resist. I mean, Trump had huge rows with CIA and FBI in his first term, and I think that will that pattern will continue, especially with Tulsi Gabbard in charge.
Yeah, I mean, what about Five Eyes? You know, what do the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand now think about sharing their intelligence?
I mean, it's a fair question, but I think they will trust their colleagues inside the agencies to protect what needs to be protected.
Quiet, Riot. Let's go on to Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. And
the yin and the yang.
well, indeed, yeah. Which one's which?
Well, I mean, look, Marco Rubio it's an extraordinary measure of how far the Overton window has moved. Marco Rubio would have considered a very hard right appointment 8 years ago. And he's now the sensible one in the setup.
With a bit of experience.
It just says everything you need to know.
Yes.
But Pete Hegseth, I mean, the kind interpretation is that he's exceptionally inexperienced and will be swallowed up by the huge contracts and interests involved in defense procurement. The less kind interpretation is that he's a sort of Christian, millenarian, crusadery, far-right type person who will cause havoc in the Middle East.
First observation on this is Trump has a history of picking people off the TV.
Right. Do you think this is what happens, Kim? Because when I heard about the Mehmet Oz thing, I thought, was he just sat at home in his boxes on the sofa
and watching the doctor on telly
and went, that guy, get me that guy. Like, it feels like that is how some of these appointments might get made.
I mean, I remember this every time I went into the White House with people. In every room there was a large flat screen TV, any room that the president might go into, and it was permanently on, usually to Fox News, sometimes to CNN, MSNBC, and they said that's the hate stuff that winds him up when he needs a bit of energy, a bit of negative energy. But he always has half an eye on the cable news channels. And yes, he does notice people there. So in my time, Larry Kudlow, who replaced Gary Cohn as economic advisor, he spotted on CBS, I think, where he was the economic pundit. John Bolton, who of course had a career inside the State Department as a proper policy geek, but then was on Fox News as a pundit for them. And when Trump fired H.R. McMaster as an executive advisor, he said, I'll have that guy from the screen. Yep. So there's a track history of this. And now in this administration, you have Hegseth, who is utterly unexperienced. But Trump will say, this guy looks the part. Look at his jawline. And you've got Oz, who he's always liked.
And McMahon, I mean, there's the wrestling connection. Is he just a big fan of?
Yeah, he used to go to watch wrestling things. In fact, there is stuff on YouTube of Trump getting in the ring with some of these wrestlers and actually wrestling with them.
Having a fake fight.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I've seen that. And also, I think there are financial links there because some of the big fights took place in his hotels and casinos and things like that. So there is a connection there. And remember, the plan for education, as we understand it, is to
get rid of the department.
To get rid of the department and delegate all of it to state by state.
To chuck it out the ring.
So exactly. So maybe she will do the equivalent of picking up one of those plastic
slamming
and just bashing the education department until it dies. They are almost the most comical choice you could make for any given position a lot of the time. And there is a part of me that thinks, is he really that far gone? Or does he have an awareness that Senate might say no to a couple of people, but they can't really say no to everyone, and therefore this is quite a good way to get the vast majority of his appointments through, and then maybe have to appoint someone else for Attorney General and Director of National Intelligence?
I honestly don't think that Trump is someone who plans 4 or 5 moves ahead. I think the chessboard is a kind of
checkers.
He doesn't think about things as sort of several moves ahead. He thinks about each day, a fresh sheet of paper, start again, fight the fight. So I think they're genuinely the people he wants in the cabinet roles. I think he knows that to Washington this will look some very strange choices. But he doesn't really care what Washington thinks. He's looking to his base. And they will see these people on Fox News, or they watch Worldwide Wrestling or whatever, and they will probably think, oh, these are really interesting choices. Not these people with grey suits we've never heard of. So I don't think he's chosen them for expecting them to fail. By the way, the other points which are really extraordinary are Elon Musk and the other guy whose name I can't pronounce as a sort of efficiency czars. Elon Musk fired 60% or was it 80% of Twitter when he took it over? And the other guy, when he was on the campaign trail running against Trump, was talking about firing thousands and thousands of government employees.
Your son is being sort of groomed for something big in a potential Trump White House. Has he told you exactly what that would be?
I just see it all on X. He says what he's going to be doing, and he's going to just get rid of people who are not working or don't have a job or not doing a job well, just like he did on Twitter. And I think he has 10% of the staff, and it's better than ever. So he can do it for the government too.
If they do anything like they say they're going to do, this is going to be absolutely explosive in America. And they're going to fire literally thousands of people from government, which would be a little controversial, to say the least.
Is that maybe the point? It's a win-win, because if it pans out, they get to say, look, we were employing all these completely useless people and everything is still running, broadly speaking, okay. And if it doesn't pan out, they get to fray the federalist fabric of America and make it much more state-based.
Yeah, by definition,
which
power flows back to the
want.
states. Less power you have at the centre, then more power the states will have. Also, potentially it frees them up to do what Trump himself has hinted at occasionally, and which some of his supporters are much clearer about, which is there are normally about 1,200 jobs that change with every administration. They would like to go 3 or 4 layers down into the administration with political appointees. So you're talking about thousands of jobs which change hand when it goes from Republican to Democrat or back. And
they sort of did that with judges last time, didn't they?
They did. And that may be, again, part of the calculation here.
Kim, it might be unfair to ask you this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We have a current ambassador to the USA, but that hasn't stopped an enormous amount of speculation that Starmer is going to switch Karen Pierce out for somebody he chooses himself, and there's been a lot of speculation about names. I'm not asking you to give your judgment on any of the front runners that have been mooted in the press, but what do you think, given all you know about the role under a Trump presidency, are the skills, relationships, qualities, experiences that will make the best version of a UK ambassador to the USA that can genuinely represent our interests? Is it somebody who's like, we've got to, suck up to these guys because they're so important, or is it somebody that can have a more sceptical watching brief?
I mean, by the way, Karen, I think, has done a very good job, and I think she's done her 4 years now, so she's reached the end of her time of actually staying on a little bit rather than leaving early. But I do think she will go in the early part of next year. And in terms of the qualities you need, look, the names that are out there, I think, if they want to do the job, they're all perfectly capable of doing the job extremely well. You need to, this is no particular order of importance, but one, you need to be prepared to be out on the Washington social circuit every night, because that's where you pick up most of the best insights and most of the best gossip. If you're not there, you will miss out on quite a lot of the talk on what is going on. Second, you need to be ready to. Diplomacy is not primarily about talking to your friends, about talking to people who disagree with you. And there is going to be, I suspect, quite a lot in the Trump policy agenda that we disagree with if he carries through on tariffs, on Ukraine, on climate change, as he says he's going to. Then you need to be prepared to deliver some tough messages. Third, you need to be prepared for the 5 a.m. Twitter storm, which, I'm sure he'll still be doing it. He wakes up early and he reaches for his phone. And in the old days, in 2016, 2020, he would tweet. Nowadays, it might be on Truth Social, it might be on X, who knows?
And anything
and it could be anything that has caught his eye from the previous day, or that is designed to get him on the top of the news agenda that day. And there is no filter there. This is pure Trump, because there's no one else sitting there at 5 o'clock in the morning saying, Mr. President, you shouldn't do that. I remember in November 2017, he retweeted some videos by Britain First. Remember them?
Oh, yeah.
A racist, far-right British group which had put some fake videos out on the internet. And Trump retweeted them. And the British press made this, by 11 o'clock in the morning, a huge story. Theresa May was on a visit to Africa, doing a press conference, I think, in Nairobi. And we were trying to get advice through to her. This had happened, and that she should say, not good. And she did. She said, to her eternal credit, she said he was wrong to have done this. And she did it in very unemotional language. We just said he was wrong, should have done it, to do it. He shouldn't do it, shouldn't have done it. And, next time I speak to him, I'll tell him that. And Trump responded quite sharply to that. But actually, I think he gave her more respect as a result of her doing that. So the other point which emerges from this is, watch out for the 5 a.m. Twitter storm, which will contain every so often something that absolutely blows things up temporarily. And there is no point in sucking up all the time, because you don't get respect for that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you will need to stand up and say you disagree with something.
Especially from alphas like Trump, actually.
Yeah.
You get less respect for that, I would think. I mean, if you want to make a statement and really annoy Trump, Kim would be a magnificent appointment, I feel.
Yes.
Reappoint.
I think I'm retired.
Darroch. Suck it up, Buttercup.
But speaking of early morning Twitter, or X as we now call it, Elon Musk is pretty obsessed with the UK at the moment. I mean, several times a day over the last week, he has been tweeting, posting, whatever, Xing, we call it, about Starmer, about Britain being, a Marxist state, a socialist state, make Orwell fiction again. You can be thrown in prison for 15 years in the UK for simply viewing what they deem as propaganda now. He is obsessed with talking the UK down. And that I find quite weird for a man who is busy, right? He's busy. He's got a lot of other stuff to be getting on with.
It's like when Trump got obsessed with Sadiq Khan and kept tweeting about Sadiq Khan. It's like, why are you even occupying yourself with the mayor of a city somewhere?
Britain is turning into a woke Stasi police state. Journalists being interrogated because someone felt offended over social media posts on X. I suppose for him it's the threat of the regulation of social media in the UK, and we know that there's various moves happening within government and with select committees to look at online harm. Is it a commercial thing
I don't know, but my feeling is, and I wonder what you think about this, Kim, that the Musk-Trump thing will fall apart quickly and quite spectacularly.
Yeah, a lot of us feel this. These are two planet-sized egos, and sooner or later,
colliding.
Interplanetary war will break out. I mean, I find it very hard to really... there's a very good biography of Elon Musk, which apparently is essential reading. I mean, on the one hand, he is a true visionary, and his SpaceX stuff is extraordinary. And although Tesla is not anything extraordinary about his technology, nevertheless he's built a successful company from scratch. And the fact that there will be huge tariffs on Chinese electric cars certainly helps Tesla, get through the next decade. But then there's some of the stuff he says that is completely wacky. And it's just hard to know what to make of him and what's going on in that extraordinary brain of his.
The thing, I guess, is that the two are not, I think, mutually exclusive. A lot of the companies, his history is aggressively taking over things that look as if they will become very successful rather than building them from the ground up. And because he has a very move quickly and break stuff attitude that, gets him results. But it is also possible to think that in the last 10 years, he is degenerating, in terms of his radicalization. Yeah. And you can see it on Twitter that it's accelerating. It's like he's created this perfect environment where all the wrong things are amplified and the truth is suppressed. And it's now his main source of information. So it's his own propaganda is radicalizing him. And you can see it accelerating. So I'm not sure what Elon Musk would do with Tesla if he took it over today. He might destroy it within a year. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a process and people change. And maybe 20 years ago, he was a very bright business entrepreneur. And
he was
now
the future
he's just a far-right conspiracist. Really bright people can become very, very blinkered.
I mean, the only part, I think that's an astute analysis. The only thing I'd add to it is he's very thin-skinned, because part of the anti-British tirades at the moment seems to be about him not being invited to some seminar about AI. And, you would have thought the richest man in the world was a bit above that, but no, he seems really hurt by it.
No, it seems he's a bit below it.
This week is the return of semi-regular feature, You've Gotta Troll With It. And for, let's say, reasons, I'm going to let Alex take this one. Alex, tell us all.
A couple of days ago, listener Chris wrote in on the topic of House of Lords reform. I will spare him the embarrassment of his last name. Now, we welcome engagement and disagreement, but this was neither. It did not express any disagreement on the substance. It just basically went, and I quote, "She doesn't understand what a second chamber does." Or why an elected one would miss the target. And apparently I was right to pull her back on focus. And we just wanted to say that while we welcome engagement on the substance, this kind of intervention, to my mind, drips with misogyny. That man would never in a million years approach me and say, you don't know what you're talking about. And incidentally, for the avoidance of doubt, I agree with Naomi on House of Lords reform 100%. I was just playing devil's advocate in order to tease out some of the opposing points of view in the conversation. My take would be actually Naomi's take. The whole thing should be elected. Burn it and start again. So I'm sorry if that's a disappointment to you, Chris. And just in case you needed to hear it from someone with a penis, fuck you up the kazoo. With apologies to Kim, who's giggling.
My late father used to say, darling, there are two groups of people you should probably never feel sorry for. Black cab drivers and farmers. Turn on any news channel.
Also not mess with, I would think.
We'll turn on any news channel this week, and depending on who you listen to, the wheels have come clean off the tractors that power family-owned farms, or the alternate view, the wheels have come off an inheritance gravy train that lets rich landowners dodge their tax burden. As ever, the truth is probably germinating quietly somewhere in the shadows of the screaming headlines. And so, chaps, before we get on to the inheritance tax part of the issue, I think it's fair to say that we do know that farmers certainly have other reasons to be angry and feel let down. Putting aside the fact, and please listeners do, that many rural communities voted for Brexit, leaving the EU has unquestionably hurt them. In fact, we've got lost EU subsidies to point to, difficulty in hiring seasonal workers, the extra cost of exporting goods or importing seeds, chemicals, whatever it is they need, but also because the last government signed trade deals with Australia and New Zealand that have meant UK produce is less competitively priced than cheap Antipodean meats. But long before Brexit, farms weren't making huge amounts of cash, or many of them weren't. The monopsonistic setup of, try saying that after a couple of drinks, setup of the UK supermarkets has meant farmers are often not offered sufficient price for their product. And most sort of documented case, of course, being around milk. So maybe my dad was wrong. Maybe we should feel sorry for them, but perhaps not for the inheritance tax issue, but maybe other things. Alex, what's your view?
Consumer goods was my area when I did investigations for the Office of Fair Trading.
I do, yeah.
And I was actually involved in one of the big price-fixing milk cases, I think it was 2001 the case, and they eventually paid the fine 2007. So, I mean, the truth is that we are very spoilt in the UK with exceptionally cheap food. Pound for pound, comparative to the cost of living, it is much cheaper here than anywhere else I've been.
And other islands, in particular, Mykonos, for instance. I was quite surprised by how expensive produce is in the supermarket versus the UK.
Okay, Mykonos is not a great example because it's a very
dry,
but also a
island.
Touristy place for people with a lot of money.
Cyprus. Food in Cyprus is considerably more expensive.
I mean,
than
generally speaking,
the
logistics of delivering to a series of small islands are expensive. But it's not just that. I think something happened with supermarkets competing against each other that impinged heavily on the quality of the food in order to push down the price. And I think it is also a very, very British personal quality to not want to make a fuss, to not want to complain. I have to tell you, in Greece, you would be shot. They would put you in front of a firing squad if you sold
a tomato
vegetables like that or meat like that. And so something very particular happened, and it pushed the price of food right down, and people have now become used to it. It's become a small part of your monthly budget, and if it goes up even a bit, you really feel it. And I don't know what the solution is, because ultimately the reason farmers don't get paid enough is not that the supermarkets squeeze them, though they do, and they do so in a very ruthless
and it's not just the supermarkets, it's the wholesalers, the food processors.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that many products that get sold
it's an
straight from
oligopoly.
farm
At every
to
level you look at it, either wholesalers or whatever, they're oligopolists. But the real reason is that people are used to very, very cheap food. And good quality food costs more money than we're used to paying. So I think there is something to the core complaint of farmers here, which is that we don't value the job they do. We don't value the thing they produce. I think there is a basic truth to that. The rest of it, my view is that a lot of it's for the birds. I know you disagree. Kim, what's your view on the current?
Look, it's not something that I have studied in any detail, so my views are fairly superficial. But I start from a couple of points. One, I hate inheritance tax because it's in fact double taxation. Everything which it's levied on has already had some tax paid. Second, I think that it's anti-aspirational, and so it's a bad thing altogether, and I would apologise completely if I was Chancellor. I also think that at least small family farms do have a tough time, and they have to cope with all sorts of climatic variations as well that make their lives even more stressful and uncertain. So I do feel a bit sorry for them. But three, on the other hand, us Londoners and us Southeasterners, we're all sort of facing inheritance tax at some point just because property prices are much higher down here than they are in the rest of the country. So you sort of feel, well, why should the farming community be entirely immune from it? But where I come out is, I think that the government, from what little I've followed of the debate, have got their figures a bit wrong. I think they've got their figures wrong for the number of farms that this is going to affect. I mean, the gulf between what they say and what the farming community and their representative organisations say is huge. And I suspect the answer, the right answer, may not be what the farmers say exactly, but it's more than the government thinks in terms of the percentage of farms that will be affected. And second thing, I just think that they've got the threshold too low. I think 1 million is just too low. I know they say it's really 3 million, though I can't quite understand why. But I think if you're really after rich landowners, you should have gone maybe up to 4, 5, 6 million.
And then make the rate 40, same as all inheritance tax, maybe.
I mean, look, there is certainly a case to be said to the farmers, okay, what would the threshold you could live with look like? I didn't hear much of that coming from the protest and the demo that we saw in Parliament and Whitehall this week. You know, sort of when asked, okay, well, look, everyone's having to pay a bit more of everything, and at the moment you're paying a lot less inheritance tax than everybody else. who is lucky enough to be able to pay inheritance tax, because let's remember, the vast majority of people will never, ever be in a position where they inherit any, estate worth its salt. Dan Needle, he's former independent tax policy, founder of the Independent Tax Policy Associates, pretty good on a lot of tax issues, I think we'd all agree. Alex, I think you've been digging into some of the numbers that he's thrown up on this. What do we know in terms of what Kim is saying about there seems to be this discrepancy between how many people are going to be affected and at what threshold?
So the government have cocked up on one issue, and they need to address that, in that they've bundled in together the agricultural relief and the business relief. And they've based the figures for how many applications they got last year or the year before that for agricultural property relief. That was only 500, and that's the number they've been touting around. The problem is because they've bundled agricultural and business, it means that the figure, that million figure, now includes tractors and things like that, and they can be expensive. A
combine harvester is a
it
very
means like
expensive piece of kit.
$500,000 upwards. So that instantly really mounts up, and you're looking at a higher figure. The figure of 3 million is actually broadly correct, because the vast majority of that kind of farm is sort of family run, so you can basically aggregate the two spouses' allowances, which doubles it, and then there's extra relief on the home if you live on the farm, and then there's extra relief if you pass it to children. And so actually it does build up to just under 3 million. So I think on that the government is right, but the number is probably going to be higher than they anticipate, because they've put business equipment and things like that in. So if they've made a mistake on that, that's something they need to look at. There's no point digging their heels in and say, the sky ain't blue. At the same time, I quite like inheritance tax, because I think it's not something that the person that's receiving it has done anything to earn. And so the problem with not taxing inheritance is that it embeds privilege. Just the rich families become richer and richer and richer, because you start from a position where you can put down a deposit and get a house instead of wasting all your money on rent. All of that mounts up. Money breeds money. And the particular problem in this country, and I've been saying this for 10 years now, no one is listening, doesn't matter, is that one of the tiny silver linings to being occupied during the Second World War is that the countries that were occupied then parceled the land. After they were freed, they said, here's a piece of land, everyone go and work it, build a house, make something of it. Because the UK has never been occupied for more than 1,000 years, essentially, the shape of land ownership is still feudal.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinary. Like 1/3 of land is owned by less than 1% of people.
And listeners, I am going to do the land tax episode
yes,
soon.
Please.
Somebody is back who I would like
that
to interview,
might be a better
and it's
way
going to
of
happen.
doing it, land tax.
And so, but it's all about wealth taxes. It's all about asset taxation. And I think you're right, Alex, that if we believe in equality of opportunity, we have to accept that there are a lot of people who get born with a golden spoon, silver spoon, and a lot of people who don't. And how can you possibly have equality of opportunity when things skew like that? I also just think we should be incentivizing people to give away their money earlier. Now we're all living a lot longer. What is the point of inheriting hundreds of thousands of pounds, perhaps even millions of pounds, when you are 65 and your parent died at 89? When that money, had you been able to have at least some of it, when you need to, have a bigger home because your family is growing and you need another bedroom, money is much more useful to people younger in their earlier stage of their life than later in their lives. Look, the numbers I think are being crunched by lots of different people. I've seen others discuss it. Our listeners will doubtless have watched various news programmes with it all crunching through. I'm very interested though in the shape of the campaign. and what we saw at the protest. Now, Clarkson was very much the biggest celebrity figure at the demo, but there was support from all of the main opposition parties there, and the National Farmers Union and others. And Richard Murphy, another tax expert who's worth following and listening to on all of this, has questioned, why the media has become so obsessed with this issue in a week when a lot of other news is happening, issues around child poverty that are affecting many, many more people than this will affect. Obviously, all of the geopolitical turmoil we find ourselves in. And he's asking the question, who's driving the narrative? Who's behind the mass mobilisation? And while I was watching it all on TV, I recognised the font on the placard that Clarkson was holding. Now, he will have had this placard thrust into his hand.
Do that.
It would have been thrust into his hand, and he'll have been told, hold this, and lots of other people were waving it around. So this is not a slight on him.
They were very uniform, the placards. They were definitely being handed out by someone.
And I realised that the Together Declaration logo was familiar. And for listeners who aren't aware, and I suspect Clarkson is not aware, I suspect the NFU is not aware, the Lib Dems, Plaid, they're probably not aware of this.
Was that the people during the pandemic?
Yes. So I believe that the farming issue has been co-opted by this group, who are a collection of climate change deniers, anti-lockdown, conspiracy theorists, who include among their number people who have really fallen from grace in the eyes of certainly progressive political commentators. They regularly appear on shock jock shows. They're very low anti-emission zones. They're very anti-15-minute cities. They seem to be very, very pro-traffic. I don't think they've ever said anything about farms and agriculture in their life. They are. They love traffic. They do not like low traffic. That is a big campaign of theirs. We'll drop a link in the show notes so people can have a bit of a mooch around their site and see what they're up to. But I think it's quite interesting that what we're seeing now is libertarian, right-wing, hard-right groups co-opting all sorts of other issues for their own ends. And I don't know if you, Alex, have any kind of thoughts on that? Like, is that something that the left needs to counter to get better at doing for themselves, or just simply shine a light on?
Yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation, Kim, over the last few weeks in many shades, because also we look at the podcasts in America and we say, does the left need its own Joe Rogan, and does the left need its own Andrew Tate? And so we've been doing various shades of this conversation, and I think every time we try it, we come into a sort of cul-de-sac, because in order to emulate that kind of thing, you have to sort of ignore evidence and reason and expertise and just make your side's point as fanatically as possible. And so to emulate that would be to give away the core tenet of progressivism, which is listen to the facts. I mean, the truth matters.
As a campaigner, I'm all for unholy alliances. I mean, I have even co-signed a letter with Richard Tice when he was the leader of Reform UK in opposition to the Conservative government's crackdown on the right to protest. So I'm all for that. But this didn't feel like so much an unholy alliance as people that had no idea who was marching alongside them.
Well, how can people not have had an idea who was marching alongside them when you have Kemi Badenoch making a speech and being applauded by farmers who were bringing their tractors to the capital in March this year? It was like 7 months ago, in opposition to the trade deals with Australia and New Zealand that she negotiated, signed and defended. So
she called them fantastic
deals.
So
that's where the thing falls down for me. When I see Nigel Farage cosplaying tweed from head to bottom, pretending he's a farmer, marching along those people, I just think he's fucking destroyed you with Brexit. This man has literally cost you more money than any inheritance tax ever will, and now you're holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Where are your principles? I think it's a fair point.
It is a very fair point.
It's
a very fair point.
The inheritance tax is actually the least of farming's problems.
And we need a new deal for farming that includes a much better relationship with Europe, totally tearing up the crap deal that Johnson delivered for them, and making it much easier for them to buy and sell with our nearest trading allies in Europe. I mean, that, as you point out, is the thing that farms need and need quickly. But we also need to address, I think, the issue that we mentioned at the top of the show about cheap food, about the unfair
also,
pricing they're being offered.
There is a problem there, right? So I did a little bit of digging. In 2023-24, according to Stratton Parker's Farmland Database survey that they do every year, more than half of farms and estates were sold for non-farming reasons to non-farmers. Mm-hmm. The same thing happened in 2022, and both years were a record number of acres being sold. So keeping the exemption is a certain path to farms not being able to feed the nation, as they like to say. How it is solved, I don't know, because it's not my area of expertise, and I don't understand that sector as well as someone proposing solutions should. But what I have noticed is that among all the complaints from the various farming organizations, I have not seen proposals for how you solve this. They just don't want it to happen. They just want to keep the exemption. But how do you solve the fact that farmland has now become an investment? It has become a good that's traded in order.
It's a financial product.
Exactly.
Rather than a commercial product.
Exactly. How do you solve that? The NFU or the various other organizations, they need to be coming forward and saying, this is our solution of how to better target the Dysons and the Clarksons of this world.
There's a very good tool that our friends at Tortoise Media have produced today called Peer Review. Kim, you'll be interested in this one.
I saw that.
And you can filter every member of the House of Lords on various different things, including whether or not they're a landowner, an agricultural landowner. So that will be, I'm sure, getting quite a lot of traffic for people digging into some vested interest there. And you won't be surprised to learn that it's the remaining hereditary peers who are amongst the largest landowners, agricultural landowners on the database.
Quiet, Riot. Now it's that time of the week when we ask you to spread the cheer. It's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is welcome to me. Good news. Do-de-o-do-lo, 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 I want good news.
Naomi, what brought a smile to your face this week?
Well, Alex, it's not so much of a heart warmer as a belly warmer I've got for you this week. And as listeners know, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has made free school meals for all primary school children a permanent policy feature, and the early results show it's making a really big difference. Independent research from charity Impact on Urban Health shows that free school meals in all London primary schools is, quote, boosting the health of families, not just the children. More than just boosting their physical health, it is having a really positive impact on their financial health too. Their report finds a massive 84% of parents believe the rollout of free school meals for primary pupils in the London area has helped or significantly improved their household budgets. Families living on low incomes are benefiting the most, while a third of parents surveyed also said the policy means they have less debt. And 1 in 3 schools say their kids are now able to concentrate better in class. So a win-win for all concerned, and a really big bravo to Sadiq Khan.
I think that's what we call a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, indeedy.
And with big thanks to Teresa M on Blue Sky, who suggested the topic to us.
Thank you, Teresa M. Maybe Teresa May. Who knows?
It ain't going to be Teresa May. But it just goes to show we do listen to you. Oh, and we have listened to the hundreds of you that have sent us the thing about the sandwich, about the sandwiches. it remains our view that it's been so well shared that we would be bringing you something new. But if you haven't seen it, we'll pop a little link to one of the funnier critiques of it. There's a very funny thread doing the rounds that tries to distinguish what sandwich filling is woke and what sandwich filling is not woke.
There's a brilliant woman on TikTok who goes, which brand is gay and which is straight? And she picked condiments yesterday and she was like, ketchup, it's fruity and spicy, it's gay, whereas brown sauce, very straight. And I think that we could probably do our own version of that, of like woke versus non-woke filling. And on that, I was thinking, what's my favourite sandwich?
You see, you're a vegan,
as a
which
vegan,
means
inherently
everything
woke.
is woke.
And short of gluten-free bread, which I don't do, but you could up the wokeness of my sandwich with a gluten-free loaf. Tempeh, thinly sliced tempeh that you marinate in liquid aminos, not soy, liquid aminos, and then you air fry, and it goes just like bacon, all crispy, and you make a BLT, but with tempeh, not bacon. It is delicious. Vegan mayo, of course. Quiet Riot. And once again, we're out of time. I'm gutted, and that is the end of the show. But Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed every second.
Listeners, remember, we'll be doing an online Ask Us Anything session on Monday, the 9th of December at 6 p.m. Links will be made available to everyone who supports us on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod if you'd like to join us.
We'll be back over the weekend, although knowing Alex, possibly sooner. But
I don't know what you mean.
But if you miss us terribly in the meantime, drop us a line to quietriotpod@gmail.com or find us on Blue Sky at Quiet Riot Pod.
But for now, thanks for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye. Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreu and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global. Quiet Riot.
Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber is down here this morning. It is cold, it is wet, but you are down here. Why?
Well, I farm about just under 5,000 acres myself, but I'm not here because of me or anything like that. I'm here to support the small farmers